Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenegar, and this is a special edition of the Eddie Network podcast. And I've been reflecting on the people that I've had on the podcast over the last several months, reflecting on my own research and study in the world of time and reality that I've been doing in preparation to produce a couple of books on the topic. It's sort of the new focal point that the circle of impact was 30 years ago. Now, time and reality is the focal point. I want to talk for a few minutes about patterns of behavior. When I began my consulting practice 30 years ago, I immediately saw three patterns of behavior, and they became the cornerstones of the circle of impact model of leadership. And the uh, the three patterns were a lack of clarity about what people were thinking. People would mumble platitudes about other things, people that they had read, something that seemed to impress them, and but when you actually engage with them in conversation about these things, what became apparent is that they hadn't really thought about it. They just adopted something that sounded good, but they didn't really know how that idea came about, or even more importantly, how that idea is to be practiced. The second pattern of behavior that I saw was a lack of respect and trust in relationships. I saw a lot of predatory behavior. I saw a lot of sociopathic behavior in organizations. And of course, we would never say that openly because we're afraid of retribution, vengeance. But those things are real. I've seen it. And I know you have. I know you've seen it. You may have been the victim of some of that, or you may be the victimizer. If you are, then you need to look deeply into your soul and decide what kind of person you really want to be after you finish work and you're alone and there's no one there because they've all abandoned you because of your behavior. The third pattern of behavior turned out to be the most concerning to me, and that is the pattern of behavior which says that the structure of an organization or the structure of a social group um, is sacrosanct and it cannot change. And that the people who rise through the ranks to the higher levels of an organization are not change makers, but they are the ones who are resistant to change. And that's how they become important, and that's how they end up becoming exploiters of an organization, exploiters of people by extracting the value and the wealth of the company as a way of protecting the company from change. And in many cases, they're that way because, as the Peter Principle states, they have risen beyond the level of their competence. And I mean, if you just take these kind of ideas, these three ideas of lack of clarity of thought, lack of respect and trust, and the dominance of structure over everything else, and you'll begin to see how these things are operating in our society today and operating in our organizations. So I want to talk about some more patterns and patterns of behavior that I think are more contemporary to the scene that we're in now, which is both one of social media and one of artificial intelligence, of AI. And these patterns are, in particular, a belief that these entities, these uh, digital structures, have the answers that we need for the future. And they're brilliant. They're brilliant programs. There's no question about that. But it's not so much what they can produce for us. It's not the access to people all over the world that social media provides me. That's important to me. And it's not that AI has quick answers and can produce things of real quality and significance within matters of seconds. That's not the point. The point is what you are becoming in your dependence upon these programs. And it's not unlike where we were 100 years ago or 150 years ago when people moved out of kind of trade skills of living in small communities and doing labor that was like labor as a woodworker or a stonemason or something like that to working on the assembly line of a manufacturing company. And it's not unlike the kind of conditioning programming that was needed then, where you are the subject of the technology. And the technology is not at your behest, but you are at the behest of the technology. And I see this in particular through the lens of the spectacle of the real, which I wrote about in 2013, which I keep talking about. And what I see there is that there's a culture that we adopt, and it's a culture of serial arousal, serial interest, serial captivation of our attention. And what I really see this as a problem of is consciousness, of awareness. And no, I don't, what I find is that people are not aware that they have been sucked into a system which is intended to pacify them and to turn them into people who will follow whatever is the dominant theme of the moment. As I've been studying time and reality, trying to work through what I see there, one of the things that I see is increasing numbers of people who speak about the present being the only thing that matters. The past doesn't matter, the future doesn't matter, the present doesn't matter. Uh, and I find that troubling because if they're really serious about that, then they mean they believe in nothing. Because there is no present, which is, and by that I mean that the anticipation of the present is already in the past. There is no future if the present is all we have. My term for this is called the eternal present. And the eternal present is only there for a moment. And it's very much like what you find on social media, where we're scrolling through 5 second, 10 second, 13 second, 15, 30 second um, stories, images, and that's the present moment. And then we're moving to the next present moment, and we've forgotten what we had just seen. And so we become disconnected from time. And not only are we disconnected from what we had seen in the past, but we're disconnected from how our lives can matter in the future. And I think this is a very, very problematic thing because what it is robbing you of is a sense of being, a sense of value, a sense of purpose, a sense that your life matters beyond the moment. The moment is just ephemeral. It's here, gone. And what are you going to do for the next moment? Are you going to recreate yourself? I'm worried about many people that I know who are kind of trapped in trapped in this sort of vortex or whirlpool of constant attention to whoever is the dominant voice at the moment and following them. Uh, I think what is important is for you to realize that there's more to your life than what you experience in the present moment. And I know you know that. And so this is not a question of what you know. It's really a question of who you are in the actions that you take. And I think one of the ways to get at this that uh, can help you to discover something about yourself that you did not maybe realize was of value is that you are not an isolated being plopped down in time where there is no time, but you are a person who has embodied a history that is generational. I mean, we all have parents and we all have grandparents, and maybe you don't know who they are. Maybe you were separated from your parents at a very young age and you were a foster child all your life, all your childhood. Or maybe you grew up in a very challenging situation where you were abused by your parents. And so you reject them. And in a certain sense, maybe you should. The point is that your experience with earlier generations has had an effect upon you. And it may have brought you to the point where you think that the living in the eternal present is a way to escape the pain, the trauma of the past. But it's still living within you. And it has brought you to this point of saying, I'm going to ignore everything and just follow what is in front of me. And what's in front of me has been programmed for you to become a passive observer and a compliant person so that the world that exists apart from you can proceed on. And there are people that you know that need you. They need you to be a whole person. They care about you. And you may not even know that they care about you because it may not be a thought. Maybe you think that you're not someone who can be cared for or loved. It really is at this level of trauma and of behavior that I see so much of what's happening in our world. And you know, and while AI has great value within the structure of projects and the work that people do, it is also like every other technology that's come along. It's a way of ignoring the deeper human issues that we all face. And so we can, I mean, it has sort of an addictive function. People take drugs, people drink heavily, they look at porn, they look at uh, sports. They fill their lives with something which gives them a sense of detachment from whatever pain that they feel. And in some cases they can't stop at where they are. They have to keep going deeper and deeper into those cultures of detachment from reality because their lives are that painful. These are people that work with you. These are people that I encounter every day. I've seen some of them on my podcast. I would never name their names, but I see the pain in their lives, and but we may not talk about that, but I can see it. So I want to come back to the pattern of behaviors that I think will be beneficial to you. The first of all, I think you need a pattern of behavior of awareness. And the awareness is being able to detach yourself as a person from all that surrounds you. Detachment from the context that you're in, so that you see the context of the situation you're in clearly. And you may not see it clearly enough when you begin to do this, because you're going to have to develop your own language for describing what you see. And your language will come out as stories. Your language will come out as principles. You say, well, I learned this and this is, I'm living my life according to this principle now because I saw that this was a way to advance me, to help me through this situation that I'm in. I think that's the first thing is you need awareness. The second thing is you must recognize that the entire edifice of the online world is there to communicate to you that your adoption of their ideas and their values is essential for your place in society. That if you do not adopt those values and ideas, then you are outside of the mainstream. You're outside of society. I think that that's a dangerous pattern of behavior to adopt because if you cannot separate yourself from and see things for what they are, then you're going to have a hard time knowing who you are. So there's the classic thought is we think, therefore we are, the Cartesian model of thinking precedes being. But the reality is that you're already a person and that you become a person that is known by yourself by the things that you do. So I'm not really saying that you must think more clearly. I think that your thinking must result in actions that you take. So the pattern of behavior needs to be, what is it that I'm doing that helps me to understand better who I am? Because I'm seeing beneficial effects from the things that I do. And so many of you are at points of transition in your lives. I know many of you who are, and I know it's treated as if this is an anomaly and that somehow you're a failure because you've entered into a transition where you're having to decide, I'm going to change my career, or I've got to change my job, or I'm going to have to change my marriage. I'm going to have to change maybe everything about my life in order to get to that point where I am the person that I see the potential for me to be. I want you to know that the pattern of behavior of change is the normal pattern of behavior. And the pattern of behavior of resistance to change is what has created the conflicts and the crisis and the trauma that we experience in the world today. The resistance to change is why people are forced into these mindsets of fear and anxiety and alienation, because if you were not fearful and didn't have anxiety and you were not alien but very deeply connected, all these things would be being presented to you that you can go do where you can discover things about yourself that you didn't know existed. The third thing the pattern I would like you to consider adopting is it, whether it's you call it meditation or some kind of spiritual practice or something. I would suggest that you find quiet in your life. And I mean, turn off all your equipment, turn off sound, find a quiet place where you can sit and close your eyes. And my guess is that if you do that, you will find yourself falling asleep. And you may fall asleep for 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, or you may find that you're asleep for a half an hour. What that would tell you is that you're tired, and your fatigue is has keeps telling you that you got to keep energizing yourself. I'm not sure which technique that you need to take or what philosophy or maybe religious expression that you need to take, because I don't think it's really about that. I think it's much simpler that you need to find quiet in your life where you can settle, take a breath, and discover thoughts that you didn't know you had. And these thoughts are your thoughts. Maybe you need to keep a pad of paper. I mean, I carry a little pad of paper with me. It's in my back pocket. I wrote down this morning these things about patterns of behavior. I think that there is that the transition that we're in as a society, a global society, there's a tremendous disruption taking place between the United States and the rest of the world caused by President Trump. And I'm not going to advocate for one thing or the other. All I'm saying is that the transition or the disruption that I see is the disruption I saw 25 years ago as coming. And it's not because some guy named Donald Trump showed up on the scene to disrupt things. I think the conditions were set up where he would respond to what he was seeing. The decisions of degradation of organizations was such that I think he stepped in. I think that's what he's doing. Whether you like what he's doing or another, that's a whole separate thing. But the recognition that he is responding to the circumstances, the context, the situation that he saw taking place, and that led him to run for political office. And I think what we've seen over the last 10 years is an example of how resistance resistant to change the way the society of organizations and institutions have become. So I think that's part of what we're dealing with. And so if you are kind of captured by the conflict, the social political conflict of what's going on globally, let me suggest that you shut everything down, stop doing 80% of your social media, stop receiving the signals that are telling you, I need to be this way or that way or some way, and be quiet and allow your own inner voice to be heard by you. And I don't think you have to tell anyone what you're hearing. I don't have to think you have to tell anyone about this. I think this is between you and yourself. And so when you become aware of what's going on around you and you're willing to separate yourself from it by trying to do things which not only on the surface, but deep within you, they are things that have meaning for you. Uh, and then you're quiet. I believe you will find these patterns of behavior will lead you into the patterns of behavior of what I call being a person of impact. And those patterns are we're taking personal initiative to create impact. And that impact is change. That makes a difference that matters. The second is that we're building relationships of trust. And I define that within an organizational context as a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people. And I bet you that you have a few people in your life where that is true of your relationships to each other. And if that is true, and that is the level of trust and respect that you have for each other, then I think it is well worthwhile for the group of you to gather and affirm that and say, this is important. How do we protect and care for one another so this thing that we have found ourselves creating, a set of relationships bounded by a culture of values, that we can hold this together because we need each other as the world goes through this tremendous transition that is happening today. Then excuse me, as I scratch my eye, the third pattern comes back to the structure pattern. And I think in this case, the question is, can I be my best self within the structure of the place where I work? I have this conversation all the time. People tell me about the stress of working in a place or a stress of working for their boss or the stress of the people who are predators in their company. I mean, I think I've mentioned in the past of this one person that I know who had a job and all of a sudden someone began to take over the job. And the next thing she knew, she was given a letter saying, we're asking you to resign. And it was had nothing to do with her work performance. It's just that there was basically some kind of political coup within the structure of this organization. Well, she's now gone and she's got another job. She's doing fine. But that's the kind of stuff that goes on within structures which are antithetical to human flourishing. And if you're in a place like that, you need to imagine yourself transitioning out of that situation into something that's better. Doesn't mean that you walk in tomorrow and quit. That's not what I'm saying. It is saying, okay, what kind of person will I want to be? And what is it that I want to see as my legacy? So if we're talking legacy, we're talking about at the end of my life, this is what people are going to be saying about you. This is what she did for me. This is who she was. This is the person that I found to be so helpful at my greatest need. That's the legacy that we offer to people, which is really the legacy of our relationships. No one's going to remember you for doing a good job because most of our jobs are serialized. We go from one job to the next, one company to the next. So there's becomes no real building of something tangible over time other than the relationships that we build and the effect that we've had on people. So I want you to think about that because this is how we become attached to or immersed in a recognition, an awareness of time being something which is continuous in our life. And if you look back in time and see the people that had an effect upon you, previous generations, and realize that you have taken on some of the things that they used to do because they had an effect upon you, and I'm doing it now. I mean, I see this in my own family, and I'm trying to acknowledge it to my family. But yeah, this is how we become the person we are. We recognize that the people who had the positive impact on us in the past have endowed us with some kind of memory, muscle memory or embodied memory. I call it generational memory that gives us a sense of direction for the future. Because when you pass away, the two or three generations that now are alive when you pass away will be talking about the generational memory that you have given to them. And this is how the continuity of time lives on in the present. So the things that you do right now with people, the way you care for people, the way you do a good work for the company, whatever you're doing in the present will have an impact upon people in the future. And the people that you have the closest relationships to will know this and will be with you in this. And they will remember you. And I see it every day. And I see it in my conversations with people. I see it here on the Eddie Network podcast. And I'm tremendously honored by what I see. And they have effect upon me because they're implanting thoughts in my mind that I'm adding to the other thoughts that I've had that help me to see a much broader world than is presented to me, whether on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or wherever it may be, or X or whatever. I find actually I find all those platforms extraordinarily limiting in scope. They're limiting in thought, they're limiting in ideas, And I think there are times where I say, well, why not just walk away from all of it? Because I can read a book, or I can listen to a lecture, or I can have a conversation with a friend and gain so much more from that, and so much more that I can take with me. And this, I think, is true for you. So seek to have an awareness of the context in which you're in, have an opinion about it, separate yourself from it, say, well, I see how this affects me. I mean, when you can say, this is how a situation affects me, you've begun to separate yourself from the effects. You separate yourself from the event, the situation, and say, well, I want this, I don't want that. And then you begin to say, okay, I need to take some action to put myself in a position where I can do this. And I don't have to do that. And then thirdly is find the quiet where you can hear the voice within you leading you to where you go. Let me give you one example of what this is like, because this may be a strange thing for you all. When 40 years ago, when I became interested in leadership, over 40 years ago, I had seen something in in a community board, business association board that I'd never seen before, which is 45 people working in concert. I said, oh, this is what leadership is. This is interesting. And I began to study it and began to have opinions about it. I had my first job doing leadership work as at a college where I was had an endowed chair in leadership, along with other jobs that I had there. And I was coming to grips with what my own thoughts were, and in many respects I was living in my head. And then a few years later, I started my consulting practice, and then 4 years, if about 4 years later, as the circle of impact formed in my mind, our family went to Jackson Hole, one of my favorite places in the world, where I used to live. And we were there for a week, and we were at a dude ranch, and we were riding horses every day. And one day we were out riding. The adults would ride together, and the kids would ride separately. And we're coming back to the ranch from riding up in the mountains, and we're coming back through. And we come around the curve, and there are the beautiful Tetons, Grand Tetons. And I heard a voice, and when you're on the back of a horse, there's not a whole lot of conversation. It's rather a very quiet, pleasant thing because you're in this natural order, which is beautiful, and you recognize I'm a small part of this, and there are all these recognitions you have, and that I would encourage you if you ever have a chance to go and be in those places and get out of your car and go take a hike. And okay, so I'm on the back of this horse, and we come around this curve, and there are the Tetons, and I hear a voice, and the voice says, "It's time to stop talking about leadership and lead." I didn't know what that meant, except that I made the decision right then and there that whatever was placed before me as an opportunity for leadership, I would accept. And within 6, 7 months, I had taken over the helm of the Boy Scout troop my sons were a member of. I became the scoutmaster. And for the next 8 years, I learned to be a leader. I took all my ideas and I put them into practice. And in many respects, everything I know, everything I'm aware of about people and about leadership, I have put into practice in that role as the scoutmaster. And everything I see about facilitating the leadership of others was born in that experience. And it could not have happened if I had not been on the back of that horse in a quiet moment of beauty and of wonder and hearing that voice, which says it's time to stop talking about leadership and lead. Well, whatever you're talking about, maybe it's time to stop talking and be quiet and hear the voice that will lead you to be the person that your potential predicts you can be. So I encourage you to change your life. I don't encourage you to go out and read a bunch of books to change your life. I encourage you to change from within your own reflection of who you are. And it's okay to talk with people about this, but understand their opinion is nothing more than that, their opinion. And they are not inside you, and they have a whole perception of you, which is for them and may not be actually beneficial to you. So listen to that voice inside of you, act upon it in appropriate ways, and begin to realize how you can separate yourself from all this onslaught of ideas and content and emotion and structure, which is intended to, I would say, pacify you and make you a very compliant human being, unable to say no and just go along with whatever is going on happening. This is why I think that grasping the idea of time as something continuous from the past into the present to the future is something that can be very beneficial to us. I'm writing about this on Substack. I'm putting it behind paywall because I don't want to share it with people who will not value it. I'm not going to toss this away as if it's just an introductory thing. It's not. This is deep, and I encourage you to do a paid subscription. It's not expensive. I'm also not talking about what everybody else is talking about. So you may think, well, how does this relate? Well, I think it's very relatable, but I'm just not playing the game that everybody else is playing. And so if you want a different voice, you have my voice, and it is different. And the Eddie Network podcast is different. And I hope you will see that and subscribe to it either on YouTube or Substack, because ultimately you're going to have to find voices, other people's voices that they have discovered they need to share, that is not about tying you into something that is seems to be a good thing, but how do I know it's good? And just kind of keeps me aroused and keeps me in a state of suspension, mental suspension, because I don't know really what the next thing is. And I don't know how I'm supposed to respond to this report or this news thing or this social media thing or this podcast or whatever. As a podcaster, I would say you don't have to respond to me at all. I give you these conversations because I want you to meet these people, but you don't have to respond at all. You have no obligation to me. And I accept that. But when you do respond, I'm extraordinarily grateful because I know I've touched you. I think that's what you need to see. The people that appreciate you are the people that you need to identify and build the relationships with. I'm sorry for the length of this, but I think these are things that I have been mulling around in my head for months, and I think they need to be said. And I encourage you to stick with me because I think we're going to go someplace that everyone else is not going to go because we're stuck. We're stuck in trying to resist any kind of change that's coming. And we're going to use whatever new technology as a way to resist that change. And it's not going to happen. The change is coming and it's here. And the best way to understand it is to separate yourself from it and say, what does this change mean for me? Do I want this? That's awareness. Okay, what do I really want? What do I really want to do? And then you go do that. And then you find that peace, that quiet that you need to realize what your voice is and how it is distinctive from all the other voices that are out there. So I thank you for watching. Appreciate you all very much. Um, I think you know I care for you, and I do all this because I do care for you. And I think you need an alternative voice of all the stuff that is going on in the world. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.